And more importantly, I really want to understand, like, why does this dude hate wholesalers? I'm talking about the one and only Mr. Bob Tompkins. Bob, man, listen, you have got this way about you that is like, it's almost infectious. Like I remember the first time I came across your video, I think I watched like 4 or 5 of them, like right then, because I'm going, who is this guy? And why is he like that serious about what he believes? Like I always tell people, Bob, there are people who are, they say something, but you know they don't believe it. Then there are other people who are seriously convicted and they come across way better. And so, Bob, thank you for being here. Thank you for being willing to share with our community. First and foremost, let's get the formalities out of the way. Tell everybody what you do. Tell everybody how long you've been doing it. And then we're gonna dive into like, because I got so many questions, man. I have like notes and I'm ready to rock. So tell everybody what you do, man.
Yeah, so Chris, I am I'm a real estate agent. I run a real estate team called the Living in SC team out of Greenville, South Carolina. We sell about 25 million worth of real estate a year, around 100 homes, and I've been doing it for 7 years. So I grew up in a real estate family. Both my parents are realtors, so I kind of knew what I was getting into when I jumped into the business. But it's been a wild ride, and I work for a company called Real Broker. And I'm responsible for having brought over about 450 agents to the company. So that is very high level, just kind of view of what what I do, what I've done, and I'm excited for this conversation, brother.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go back before the 400 plus agents, before the congratulations on the new baby, before all of those things. Who was Bob? You know, before he found his voice, what were you doing? You mentioned that your family had been in real estate, and you shared a little bit with me prior to this interview, kind of what that looked like. Give everybody an understanding of what it's like to grow up in a family of people who this is like the world. It's not the corporate ladder CEO that you grew up in the house of. It's not the person who's trying to figure it out in a traditional 9 to 5. Give us an understanding of what that world was like growing up and how that was different from maybe even your friends who had families and moms who had, traditional jobs.
It's actually funny. It's not a question that I've ever gotten before, and I think when I think about my childhood and how it was different and how it shaped me to be able to be where I'm at today, my mom was very successful. So my mom she was the one that got a real estate license. She's been a real estate agent for over 20 years. My dad later got his license to help her and to be a part of like her business and help her grow. So my mom, when I was real little, worked in a cosmetic store in the mall. Like she was one of the people that would stand out and like do people's makeup and would sell mascaras and makeups and all the different things. So when I was real little, what I remember about my mom was that like, she worked, she had a decent job, but it wasn't anything that really provided on a high level for our family. And she's not college educated, like she didn't go to college. And my dad was. And then when my mom got her license, all of a sudden she hit the ground running. She worked her ass off. After 3 or 4 years, started to kind of blow up in her business to the point to where my dad like left his job, got his license to help her. And through that lens, I was able to see success in someone that didn't fill like the traditional role of a breadwinner. Like you would think a college educated corporate ladder, someone who moved their way up. That's how all my friends, that's where most of their parents were. So it was very, where culture's mindset and culture's idea around employment and where you want to go in life, it all starts with college and then this corporate system. And for my mom, she was the antithesis of that. She did the exact opposite. She didn't go to college. She worked a dead end job. She got her license and then blew up a business. So for me, there wasn't one path that I had to follow. At least in my mind, there wasn't one path that I had to follow to success. That success was going to be wherever I applied myself, which I think now looking back on it, that has been a very instrumental part of my mindset in business.
You bring up some interesting points. So I want to understand Bob's view as a kid, like watching this at the time. I'm sure as a kid, you didn't understand that like she was actually winning at some point, right? The train is finally starting to move, but you could see something was going on. Help us understand a little bit about like as she's getting these wins, and you just know that it's just like, are you having to go on these house visits with her? Were you having to, help out in the business for a little while? Were you, hearing her yell at, trying to close a deal? Like, what was that? What was it like to see as she started to get her footing in this world? How were you having to interact or engage with that? Because I know, like in our household, there was a learning curve for me because my wife was already investing, but our sons was kind of used to like, hey, if we pick you up from practice, we might have to go view this house. We might have to go, so give us an understanding of what was that like in your context.
Yeah, so there were two things. It was on the weekends. If my dad was busy and my mom had an open house, then I was having to go to the open house. My mom did a good job as far as like kind of sheltering me, keeping me from having to go to showings. But the one thing that sticks out, this isn't necessarily us having to like do a lot of work, but me and my brother understood that if the phone rang, it was our job to get the hell out of the way. Like my mom was coming through the hall running 100 miles an hour to get to that phone. And if we got in the way, that was going to be a big problem. So like, really, she did a good job of kind of sheltering us from having to be in the work all the time. But, it was around the kitchen table. If the phone rang, she was negotiating out that deal right there. So, I got to experience a lot of it by just kind of being around it. Whether that was at open houses or whether that was watching her knock out deals around the kitchen table. And you didn't realize it at the time, but the amount of things that you picked up on and the language and the way of communication that she had, that all of that kind of got ingrained in me as I grew up.
Yeah, as a child, what would you say was the thing about seeing and experiencing that process as a kid that you hated that now you have an appreciation for? What was that?
So, I appreciate it to an extent. I still kind of hate it, but when I played sports growing up, and there's this all the time. I would look over to the stands, and my dad would still be there, but my mom would have had to have gotten on the phone, and stepped out to negotiate a deal. And it used to drive me nuts. I mean, because, it's like you're a kid. You always want to be able to look over the stands and see your parents. As an adult, where I do appreciate it is that my mom was not going to be in a position to not be able to provide for us. Like she was going to always make sure that we had what we needed to have. So like as a parent having a couple young kids, like I appreciate the hell out of that. At the same time, there are some things in my business that I'm looking to build a certain way so that I can always be in the stands, Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. So let's talk about I want to kind of fast forward in this journey, because I would imagine that being the kid and having to experience it, did you ever feel like I'm never doing that? And did you kind of shy away from real estate as you got older? What was that, when you finally were on your own 2 feet and kind of, being your own man, what was that journey like? And then talk to us about like the day you decided to do a deal? I want to hear like this first Bob Tompkins deal. Like I'm really curious about that one.
Yeah. So, all right. So that's a lot. So when I was, so I went to college. I went to college to be a preacher, believe it or not. So I went to school to be a
Ah,
pastor. Yeah. And went to school for right at 3 years. Got a job in the field as a youth pastor in a church. Made some dumb decisions. Things didn't really work out. Realized it's like the ministry is probably not where I need to be. So I flipped on the other side of things and became a bartender. And I was a bartender for right at 2.5, 3 years. And in all of this, it's when you talk about like going out on your own, being an adult, like once I was on my own 2 feet, why did I, go to real estate? I think the biggest reason I went to real estate was because I couldn't find my footing. Like I got out of the house. I had been on my own, like at college, out in the real world, working for 4 or 5 years total, and I started to realize like I didn't know what to do. I was having a hard time. I'd got myself in a lot of debt, and I just kept looking at my mom. And no offense to my mom, because my mom's an amazing woman, but I looked and I was like, man, if she can do it, like if she can do that, again, like she didn't go to college, and she grinds. But I'm like, I watch her sit on the couch and watch a lot of TV shows, and I'm like, you know, if she can do that with her work ethic and her level of education, I'm like, I know I can do it. So it was actually funny enough. It was for my 23rd birthday. I called my parents and I was like, hey, I don't want anything for my birthday, because normally they'd get me, they give me a few nice things, and I was like, listen, I don't want anything for my birthday. All I want is for you to pay for real estate school, because I had no money. Like I had no money. So my mom obviously was incredibly excited about that. It was not a career field that I necessarily wanted to go in, but it was one that I was willing to fall into because nothing else seemed to be working. So called them up from February to June. I went to school, took my test, actually failed the test 3 times. So it was the 4th time that I took the real estate test that I passed it. And I think that was a bit of arrogance on my part, because I thought that just because I'd grown up around it, I didn't need to study, didn't need to do any of that stuff. I would just pass the test. So it took me 4 attempts. And then when I got my license, you talk about my first deal, I actually went through my Facebook friend list. At the time, was probably about 1,600 people. And I messaged every single one of them to let them know that I'd gotten my real estate license. And a guy named Luke Harden, who, funny enough, we work out at the same gym. We go to the same church. Luke was like, you know what, man, I'm going to give you a shot, because like me and my wife are looking to buy our first house, and like I'd love to help one of my buddies out. And we started looking. Like 20 days later, went under contract on a house, and then closed about 30 days later. So it was, that initial effort of saying, I'm not gonna leave anybody untouched. I'm gonna message every single person in my friend list to make sure that they know I've gotten my real estate license.
so this is interesting because I've experienced personally when I first started building my side business this almost like a failure to launch. And what I mean by that is it's like you did all of the work, but you're afraid to like tell anybody. You messaged 1,500 people. what where did you get the that sounds like one of those first kind of pillars of your authenticity today. Where did you get that level of courage after getting your license? Because I'm going to tell you, you probably run across people like this all the time. They'll get their license. They'll have done all the work. But you talk to them a year later and you're like, hey, Chris, good job. How many deals have you done? And you're like, Bob, right? Like they've got all the excuses in the world. Where did you get that gumption to go, I'm hitting all 1,500 people? Where did that come from in you?
So to be completely transparent and completely honest, it was because when I was in ministry, my exit from ministry was one of, when I say I made bad decisions, like I made very poor decisions, like ruined my ability to be a pastor again. Like, I mean, like completely ruined that. And I had an identity crisis. All of that fell apart for me because from when the point I was like 16, 17 years old, that was all I ever planned to do. So when I made those decisions that made that crumble onto itself, and then when I got into the bar industry, like I fell off a cliff as far as my lifestyle was concerned. Like I started drinking started drinking entirely too heavy. Got into drugs. Got into women like as much as I could. Like it was just a huge problem in my life. And over the course of that 2.5 to 3 years that I was bartending, like my life went from being very well structured on a very positive trajectory to all of a sudden like hitting rock bottom incredibly quick. So when I got my real estate license, in a lot of ways, like my reputation amongst a lot of my peers had already been shot. I'd already hit, in my mind, what was rock bottom. Like things were awful. And I had this overwhelming fear that I was just going to stay there, that was where my life was going to be for the rest of my life. So for me, like messaging 1,500 people was like, if I don't do this, then I'm gonna stay. Like, I'm gonna be right where I'm at. And I was so uncomfortable with the thought of staying in that same place that it did not matter what people thought of me. And the other thing was, I already knew people didn't think great things of me. So it was like, you know what? I'm gonna go message every single person, and if there's anybody that's willing to, place a bet on me, and work with me on a deal, then that's my way out of where I'm at right now. So that was kind of where my mindset was. And I think for a lot of people getting started, they have an aspiration to do something, but they don't have like a fear of remaining the same.
Wow.
And I think that fear of remaining the same has to be greater than what you aspire to. Because if you're afraid of staying where you're at, then you're going to be willing to do whatever it takes to get out of where you're at.
Man. Wow. I remember that feeling in my own life. I experienced a corporate layoff, and it lasted for 2 years. And I couldn't find anything. And I remember that fear. Would you consider that fear to be healthy?
Yeah. I mean, like in the moment, it's not a healthy, like it's not a healthy place to be. Like, because where you can go mentally, like your mindset around that sort of thing is not, it can lead to bad things to be there. But once you're in that place, I mean, in my opinion, the only positive way to deal with it is you have to press through adversity. Like, so from a mental standpoint, I think the way I handled it in a lot of respects, and not to like brag on myself, but I think from a lot of respects, I handled it one of the best ways that you could, which is, here's where I'm at. How do I get to the other side of this? And then doing whatever it takes to get to it. I think the unhealthy place to be is when you find yourself in that situation, is just accepting it, and just when people accept that they have failed or that they are a failure or that this is all they're ever going to amount to, because that's not a truth. Like, it's just a lie that they tell themselves that allows them to be somewhat comfortable with the position they found themselves in. So like, I think that it's like pressing through that adversity and having that mindset of like, I've got to get out of this is probably the best way to handle a rock bottom sort of situation.
It's interesting. I've had many, and I'm still human and still here, so I'll probably have some more of situations where things didn't go as planned. And you talked about your rock bottom situation of being at the church, kind of being on this path, and then it all fell apart. What did that do to your your view of yourself and the spiritual relationship that you at that time may have had between you and God, and how that played a part in your downward spiral. Because I know for me, there have been times where when I failed in the eyes of what I thought I should be doing, I had a lot of assumptions also piled onto my failure. And I made it worse because of the way I was thinking about the failure. And it's kind of like, it's one of them things. It's like, well, if I'm out already this far, well, I might as well go all the way because, whatever, right? We continue down this path. What did that do with your relationship with God? And how did you find some version of a North Star? Because to your point, I know what it's like to live from a place and never live toward anything else. I've been there. I understand that space. And there's a lot of people who are building a side business that, quite honestly, Bob, they listening to you, but they like, Bob, I lost money already. I my wife don't believe, or, I can't just call everybody up again, Bob, because they already know that I messed up before. And here I come talking about another business, right? Or something else that I'm starting. Like, it sounds great, but Bob, come on, man. Like, I don't have another, basically they're living from a place. Talk to me about that journey and just help our audience understand, like, when you made the decision to make the phone calls, but more importantly, you, at some point, there's a journey of even you getting okay with who you were in the mirror. What was that like?
So, without trying to get like preachy, but when I look,
it's all good here. Don't you worry. You say your truth.
Right. So when I look at script, let me preface this. When all of this happened, it absolutely ruined my identity. Like I had what I thought I had in a self identity. I had an absolute crisis. Like the whole thing fell apart. I did not know who I was. But when I look at scripture, so let's look at Exodus, you have the Hebrew people that are enslaved by the Egyptians. This is essentially rock bottom. Like they are enslaved. They have no freedom. They are in a terrible position. So God brings them out of it. But what happens for the next 40 years? They wander in the wilderness.
Lost.
So it's like they're absolutely lost. So it's like when you say, like, how did I find a North Star? It's like, I didn't. I came out of this identity crisis into this absolute wandering. Like I had no idea where I was going. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know how I was going to get there. And really, in a lot of respects, it's like when I look at like God's hand in my life and the certain places He put me, there were plenty of times that required my action to press forward, but like He kept situating me to be able to get out on the other side of it. And the book of Romans says that, God works all things according to the good of those who are called according to His purpose. So it's like, when I look at that, there was a lot of things in my life that I thought were terrible. And when I look back on them, they were all necessary. Like I would not have come to the place that I am now. I would not have my mindset around business. I would not have my mindset around family. If the things that happened to me had not happened to me, like I wouldn't end up in the same place. So it very much was like this wandering of times, is trying to figure out where am I going. And, when I came to real estate, it was very much the only thing that I even saw as an option. It was either I'm going to stay bartending or I'm going to go do this thing that I watched my mom do. And I think I can try my hand at it, because when you looked at the corporate ladder, there were no options for me. I had dropped out of college. Like I didn't have a college degree. I didn't have any specializations in anything. So like there wasn't a corporate ladder for me to climb. It was either you keep bartending and you keep doing the thing that you're doing, or you go try to do what your mom's done. And, that ended up landing me in a place that had allowed me to prosper. But I had to go through all that. I had to go through all that bullshit to get to where I'm at now.
You know what's interesting is that a lot of times it's hard to accept that you still got to go through it, whether you like it or not.
Thanks.
I know what it's like to want to avoid the thing that's right in front of you, right? Like it's and I've seen where it's easier to avoid, right? Like it's just easier. You can literally live your entire life avoiding conflict. You can live your life avoiding the real version of you in the mirror. You know, as you were talking, I was reminded of a quote that I love from John Wooden, and it says, "Things work out best for those who make the best of how things work out." And I love that quote because it's not the fact that you won't have terrible situations. It's what do you do once you're in it? What do you do once you're in it? Talk to me about you start building in real estate. You do your first deal. Thankfully to him, and I'm sure you're always grateful for him for taking that chance on you.
Yeah.
But at some point as men, we make decisions. What was the decision that you made once that deal went through?
So, I mean, in all honesty, so like the first year of my career was very much just kind of like I was not really committed to it. Like I went through and I went through and I messaged all those people. I found some early success. So I had the deal with Luke. Then I had I had a for sale by owner that decided to list his house with me. Had a guy that I bartended with bought a house. Then I had one other person named Ethan. And it was like I had 4 deals that happened really quickly. I mean, like within the first like 3-4 months of my career, which for a new real estate agent is a lot of deals in a short period of time.
That's a lot.
Most people that get into real estate don't sell anything in the first 4 to 6 months. So like for me to have 4 and 4 was very quick. So I almost like kind of grew complacent to where I was like, oh, okay, like I got this. Like I felt like I could just go through the motions and coast at that point, without really understanding the sort of foundation you have to build for a business. So as I got into it, you know, I started seeing around month 6, 7, and 8, things started to kind of fall off. Like I didn't have the same sort of business, but also this is gonna sound funny, is I met my wife during this time. So like we started dating, and like is I didn't care. Like I just wasn't putting the same energy in. You know, she and I were doing great. It didn't like the career kind of felt like secondary at that point. But we dated. We actually got married really quick. So it's one of those like we met, dated for like 3 or 4 months, got engaged, got married 6 months later. So happened very quick. And then I had this realization about 4 5 months after we'd gotten married that I was like, okay, I've got to actually start providing, because I started looking at our family dynamic, and you know, I was closing a deal here or there, and then I was still waiting tables part time. And my wife was an assistant manager at a grocery store. She was out earning me by probably 30-40%. And so when you say like as a man, I started looking at it and I'm like, if I want to be the provider and contributor to my family that I want to be, then I've got to start taking this seriously. So at the time, you know, I didn't know what to do. So I changed brokerages. But I went from a brokerage that had a very low split and low fees to a brokerage that had very high fees, but a very high split. So it was going to cost me a lot of money per month, which put me in a position of either succeed or fail. Like, because the fees were going to run us dry in 4 to 6 months if I couldn't go out and be successful. So I put myself between a rock and a hard place, because I knew that, you know, it's pressure that creates diamonds and it's fire that refines gold. So if I can put myself in a position that is going to force my hand, then I'm going to be successful. And because I had also known that from when I first got my license, that fear of being, you know, that fear of remaining the same was what pushed me to go and message all those people and get off to a hot start. And if I ran me and my wife's bank account dry in 4 to 6 months on office fees, then I was going to be back in the exact same situation that I had been in a year and a half before that. And I wasn't going to allow that to happen. So I put myself in between a rock and a hard place. And then that was in October of 2017 was when I had my first deal with my new brokerage. And 2018 was the first year I made six figures.
Hey, I know you're enjoying this episode, but I wanted to let you know and invite you to the Grow Your Side Business community. That's right. You can join us right now. Let me show you what you get when you go to growyoursidebusiness.com. So, number one, you're going to get access to our community of builders and side business pros. Number one, you could join our Massive Action series where you can get all of our free content. More importantly, I wanted to show you something we just rolled out that you can get access to right now. The Side Business Masterclass is happening every single week and it's free. And you could join us right now on our Side Business Masterclass. Come learn the topics, the titles, and the things that we're doing. And more importantly, come join our program. One of the cool things about joining our program is that you're going to learn some really great stuff from people just like you. So I want to give you an example of what that looks like. Well, number one, if you go to the About section, you know what's pretty cool? You're going to see you're a side business pro. You're going to find other people who are also successfully discontent. That's right. We're building businesses. We're learning and we're growing. More importantly, we're able to do it with other ambitious employees just like yourself. The other thing is you're going to learn about who we work with. You're going to understand our community, how we've helped, what we do. We're going to, more importantly, you're going to understand our manifesto. We are massive action takers. My definition of massive action is those who execute above the average. That's the only reason why you're here, right? More importantly, you're going to be able to get access to our Side Business Masterclass and join our community. Listen, I know that you're enjoying this episode, but what I'd really like for you to do is go to growyoursidebusiness.com, join the Side Business Masterclass, and you know what? Keep watching this episode. Back to it. Wait a minute. Hold on. We go from I don't know who the heck I am, and I'm half awake in this life. To I marry this beautiful woman, and I finally cross this 6-figure mark. I want to first of all I want to give honor to your wife because one thing I know in my life is that things didn't change until I married the right one for me. And that was in all facets of my life. In my world, my wife was already making great money. So I had a lot to learn. But I also realized that there were things about me that I hadn't yet accepted. And the only way I was going to get there was I had to step up to the plate. To your point, hey, I got to make some money. I got to get back on this horse, and I got to start making this thing a reality with my back against the wall. So something that y'all have just found out, if Bob's back is against the wall, don't bet on the wall, okay? He gonna win, all right? That's one thing we just found out. I'm curious as to the types of conversations you and your wife were having before things got good. Was it contentious? Were you kind of scratching your head at times going, I don't know what to tell her, but I really don't feel like doing this right now? What was that like? And where did her support? Because it sounds like she put a battery in your back. And what did her support do for you as this business started to grow, as you're on your way to these first 6 figures?
I think the biggest thing that my wife did for me is that she would criticize my actions, but she would never criticize me as a person.
What? Explain that one.
So, like, there would be frustration around, like, you get off from waiting tables and you go drink with your buddies at the bar. And it was like, I wish you wouldn't go do that. You know, I have a problem with you going and doing that. But it wasn't like these identity. It wasn't like she would talk down my identity or talk down who I was.
Yeah.
It's not like she would call me a drunk. I think in a support role, whether it's me to her or her to me, like
Mm-hmm.
in our marriage, it's very important that like I married the person and I know who the person is. And the person may make some decisions and may have some actions that don't align with who they actually are
Yeah.
because maybe they feel inadequate or they're going through something. Like, for example, right now, I think she'd be fine with me sharing this, but like right now, we've got two kids. We've got a 12-week-old at home or 13-week-old at home. And for her, like she stays at home with the kids now, but it's very difficult for her, and
Mm-hmm.
there are some times where maybe she'll, snap and yell at the kids or she'll say something, and then obviously she feels bad about that because she doesn't want to have hostility towards the kids. She doesn't want them to be in any
Mm-hmm.
sort of toxic environment. For me, I can either be in a position where I say like, hey, listen, we know that we shouldn't talk to him that way. Let's work towards, parenting differently.
Yeah.
Or I could come in and be like, why are you being such a bitch? Like I
Right.
could
Right.
technically come in and be aggressive at her and say,
Yeah.
that's labeling her
Yeah.
as that sort of person. She never
Mm.
labeled me as a failure, never labeled me as a
Mm.
problem. She was like, hey, look, like, I feel like if you can clean this up, if you can fix this, she always worked with me on my problems and not at me when it came
I
to my
love
problems.
this because what I've learned is in marriage, you don't attack the person, you attack the problem that you see. You sit on the same side of the table and you look at the problem. And so for her to say, I don't like it when you do this, she's not saying I don't like you. She's saying, hey, this thing is a hindrance. And I want Bob to fix this thing. And I'll help you even fix it. Right? Like, if you need some accountability, whatever. But I want this thing to get better. And I love that. Man, shout out to your wife for having the internal wisdom to wanna do that, right? Because some people
Well, and
don't want to
especially
do
like
that.
I mean, we're still young, but like we were so young. Like, I mean, she was 23. So, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you're talking, you got a 23-year-old woman. We're young, we're immature. Like, we were both doing a bunch of dumb stuff,
Yeah.
So for her to never attack me as a person, because I feel like it's a very easy thing to do.
Oh,
To just be
100%.
like, oh, it's like you're the problem,
Yeah.
and I see a lot of people do it, and I see a lot of those marriages end up, not turning out too great because
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's something that at the time she consciously did. And in a lot of respects, I think it's just the type of person that she is,
Yeah.
and I think I lucked out when it came to that. Like I
Yeah.
found I found a woman that just was never going to attack me as a person. So that has been a major catalyst for me because whenever I've been willing to make bets on myself, she's always believed in me. Like,
Mm.
and that's been a huge thing for me because I think a lot of people, they may be in a relationship or they have a spouse or something that questions everything that they want to do, and does not empower them to go do it. So for me, my wife, whenever I've said, "Hey, I'm gonna make this bet on myself. I'm gonna do this," now it's gotten to the point where if I say I'm doing something, she's just like, "Okay, fine." Like she's seen enough successes and she's seen enough things work that she doesn't even care to really have conversation about it. Before, she would still make me talk out and justify and explain myself, but at the end of the day, she's like, look, if you think this is what's best for our family, like, you are I think she understood like my role in the family ultimately is one of provision. So if she's like, if this is what you feel like you need to do to properly assume your role and to live out that role for our family, then you need to do it. And I think whenever you have somebody, it doesn't necessarily have to be a spouse. I mean, it could be a sibling, a parent, it could be a friend. But when you have that person that will stand behind you and encourage you and believe in you, like, because it is hard to muster up self belief, and it's like having that community around you, whoever that is, to say like, hey, we believe in you and we believe that you can do this. That's a very powerful thing.
It really is. So I want to get into a few of your um, heavily held beliefs
Yeah.
that I've gotten a chance to see. For those of you who have not gotten a chance, just go search Bob Tompkins. Um, Instagram. Go search it, especially on TikTok, because that's where his sauce lives. Um, so you're in this real estate game. There's everybody from timid Timothy to bold Bobs, right? And everything in between. What's a misconception about real estate right now that just irks you, and that is like this, like it's a misconception and it's out there, but it needs to be dealt with? What's one of those for you right now about real estate?
I mean, so this is one of the things that drives me nuts, and this is from like the general public, is this idea that the market is always going. It looked like I lagged for a second. So this idea that the market is always going to crash is
Hmm.
because I got my license. Well, I mean, what was that, 2016? And there were people then that I would talk to, and they were like, "Yeah, I'm not going to buy now. I'm going to wait for it to crash." And it was like, "What are you talking about? You're going to wait for it to crash?" In my mind, I was like, 2016. I'm like, market just crashed, like 2008, 2009. What are you talking about? And people have this idea that prices are always going to come down. And when you look out over the last 50 years of real estate, the market will have corrections. But since I think it's like 1981, since 1981, 2008 is the only crash that we've had. And it happened out of bad lending practices. So like, it drives me crazy when people look at it and go, "Oh, I'm waiting for the market to crash." It's like, look, real estate is one of the best wealth builders because you have to pay for a house over your head. Like you have to own, like, I mean, you have to have a roof, whether you rent it or buy it or whatever. You have to have one. And even if the market goes down, if it's some sort of correction, or if we run into a second crash for the last like 40 some odd years or whatever it's been, then if you're comfortable with your payment, then you have a roof over your head, and nothing's going to change on that. Where a landlord can affect everything. It's just the safest place to be is in a position of home ownership. So the whole when people look at real estate as like, "Oh, I'm just going to try and time the market and make a ton of money," it's like time in the market is what makes you money. Like if you live in a home for 20 years, if you look at the statistical data of the last 100 years, there's no way on God's green earth you own a home for 20 years and then don't build equity in that house over 20 years. So that's one of my like sticking points. It just it drives me nuts because you can look at the data, and the data very clearly shows you that the right place to be is owning a home. But people so much want to say, "Oh no, I'm just waiting for it to crash."
Yeah.
And it's like, what are you talking about? Like
Yeah.
it's one of those things that's like, if you look at the chart, no one should look at the chart of where home values have gone for the last however many years. And there's no way you look at that chart and say, "You know what, the best place for me to be is outside of this." No, it's like the best place for you to be it's like if you look at the S&P 500 and you're like, investing is a bad idea. It's like, no, it's not. Like, listen, we can have our disagreements on the best ways to invest,
Yeah,
but like,
100%.
real estate and and the stock market and a diversified portfolio, it's like both of those things are some of the most secure investments that you can make. And trying to time it, I mean, yeah, you may make 10% more or 5% more, but what if you time it the wrong way? You try and wait it out, and now you've lost 10 to 20% potential gains because you sat on the sidelines.
Well,
The thing is, we can always deal in like,
yeah.
we can talk about what ifs all day long.
Yeah.
We
It's
have
good.
data, and we have the reality that we exist in right now. and you have to make decisions in the right now based on the data of the past. You have no idea what's going to happen in the future. Market could completely crash and burn tomorrow. The market could explode tomorrow. And there's a lot of outside influences that will contribute to that. Like if the Fed decides that they're all of a sudden going to hike rates 2%, well, over the next year, well, the market's going to fall apart. If the Fed says, you know what, we're going to drop rates 2%, well, all of a sudden, market's going to blow up. Like, I mean, so you don't know what the Fed's going to do. You don't know if Russia's going to launch a nuke or not. Like, you don't know. What you know is past data and where we exist currently. And it's like you have to make decisions on that. And too many people want to speculate and try and make decisions on unknowns and what ifs.
Interesting. So, as you talking, I'm just, man, it's fascinating because a burning question I've been wanting to ask other people, like my wife's a broker, and I talk about this with her all the time, but I just always have this question. I was like, and I was so glad you agreed to do this interview, because the one question I wanted to ask you is, Bob, why is there so much bad teaching in real estate?
I think one of the biggest problems in real estate is that there's an incredibly low barrier of entry into the business. So like where I say, oh yeah, like I didn't have to go, like my mom didn't go to college. I didn't have to go to college. Like, or I didn't have to finish college to get my real estate license. It literally took like a couple months, to go through this whole process. When you look at other industries, there is a level of education that's required to properly understand what you're dealing with. I think a lot of people in real estate don't have that. And so you end up with, NAR, the National Association of Realtors, just announced like we have 1.6 million licensed realtors in the country. That's a ton. Like that is a ton of people. And the majority of them, the average realtor only sells like 3 to 4 houses a year. So it's like when you got 1.6 million people only sell a couple homes a year, a lot of those people don't know what they're talking about. Like they thought they could make some money, so they got their license, and they're really dealing in something that they aren't extremely educated in. And then I also think you have a lot of people that you mentioned earlier about how I don't like wholesalers. I think like at the beginning of the podcast you mentioned I don't like wholesalers. And I think there's people that exist like in that space that look at real estate as simply something to be leveraged, as something to just, hey, I'm going to go in here and make as much money as I can as fast as I can. And when they approach the business and when they approach property, they approach it completely differently. So the way they educate on it, so the way I educate on real estate and the way like really good producing agents in real estate educate on it is around this idea of wealth building for the homeowner, where wholesalers approach it as wealth building for the wholesaler. So there is a different person in mind. So when you have these are competing levels of education because people are coming in they have different end goals. One is self-serving. How can I make as much money for myself as possible? The other one is supposed to be, I'm not saying all realtors are this way, but it's supposed to be client serving. Like, how do we make this person as much money as possible? And at the end of the day, we get a little piece of the pie as a result of it. So like when you end up with people wanting different things out of it, there's going to be different levels of education. And if you listen to the wrong person, like if a wholesaler's teaching, like I said, they're self-serving in a lot of respects. So if I am trying to get into the market and I'm listening to someone who is self-serving, they do not have my best interest in mind. But if I buy into what they're saying, then it's only detrimental to myself. So a wholesaler is going to constantly preach on a crash. Crash is coming, crash is coming, crash is coming, because they're going to operate on a seller's fear to get them to sell at a lower price on a quote unquote cash offer. So like because of that, if I buy into that education, I'm only hurting myself because that person has a self-serving reason in educating.
So,
That's a long-winded answer.
No, this is good conversation because let me play devil's advocate, Bob. When people who have never even looked at real estate, right? And they hear about a low barrier of entry like wholesaling, is it possible, Bob, that I could start wholesaling and have a client service approach to wholesaling?
I would say it's difficult.
Okay.
And the reason being is like real estate has for a long time been just ridden with unethical practices and con men, and like it's one of those industries that has just always had problems. In fact, realtors weren't even introduced to the real estate scene until the early 1900s. And one of the biggest reasons realtors came about was because you had people that would forge title, they would forge deeds, and they would sell bad deeds to people. And
wow,
like it was a huge thing. I mean, granted, now with technology and the different record keepings we have, it'd be much harder to do that. But like early 1900s, it was not. So like people would forge deeds, they'd sell a deed to a property, $50,000, or in today's money, $50,000. Then they hijack it out of town, go somewhere else, and you don't even know. Like, I own this property, and then the court's like, no, you don't. Like, that person didn't have a right to sell you.
Yeah.
So you had stuff like that would go on, but brokering, like wholesaling, is essentially brokering without a license. And the thing is with that is if you don't have a license, it means you haven't had to learn the ethics of this. You haven't had to learn the history. You haven't had to learn any of those things. So I think it is very, I mean, here's the thing. To become a realtor is an incredibly low barrier of entry. It's a couple grand in a month. Like it's not like what I'm doing is this super hard thing to get into. It's not like a doctor's got to go to school for 10 years. Like, no, so I had to go to school for 2 months and I had to spend a couple grand, and I didn't even spend it. Like my parents paid for it. So it's like, it's like, but to get in, it's like, there's not a huge barrier of entry to get there. Wholesaling's even less, but wholesaling ignores a lot of the basic ethics on like why realtors were introduced to the market to protect consumers. And I think a lot of people look at us as like, oh, we're just trying to make a quick buck. I mean, because there's negative stigma around realtors all the time. It's like people just trying to jump in, make a fat check on a deal, whatever. But when practiced properly, like realtoring is very much a protective measure for a client, because we understand how deals are supposed to operate. There's a whole bunch of things that we do that just simply, and a lot of it's not even things we do. A lot of it's just things we know that help protect the consumer. In a wholesaler situation, like they have no fiduciary duty. And I understand like it's a super low barrier of entry, because like it doesn't matter. My wife could go and try and wholesale something today, even though she has no education in real estate.
Right.
Like she could just jump in and do it. But even there, like if you're not properly educated, you're going to set yourself up to get sued. So it's like there's a lot of different things that play into it. But I mean, I have a lot of problems with it.
Hey, I know you're enjoying this episode, but what would be helpful for you right now? Not only continuing to listen to these episodes and these interviews that we conduct, or being able to build you a high value side business. That's right. Well, I have something for you. We've created the most active community, the top of the line masterclass that you need to be a part of. It is called the Side Business Masterclass. That's right. I need you to go right now to sidebusinessmasterclass.com. Join us. Every single week, I am giving you an opportunity to learn and hear what we are actually covering, and more importantly, you can be a part of our program. That's right. Inside of our program, you're going to get masterclasses. You're going to get exclusive access to experts. You're going to learn and be able to leverage our focus framework. More importantly, how you can use it using the current skill sets that you're already using on your day job, and how do you turn that into something that can be a high value side business that can start to make you your own revenue that you pull the lever on. Because I'm telling you right now, if you don't create your own leverage, you're somebody else's. So go to sidebusinessmasterclass.com right now and let's get started building you a high value side business. And let's get back to the episode. Let's talk about this. So you chose a way to show up on social media that, dare I say, 90% of people would never do. And I think it's for two reasons. I think one, you chose a way to show up on social media that is reacting to what people are doing and what they share already on social media. And two, so that's the way you show up. But the reason I think that most people wouldn't do it is one, most people don't want the smoke for what the backlash is for sharing their opinion. But I think the second thing is because it's such a noisy world out here. And I think that people like, dare I say, acceptance. And they don't want people to disagree with their way, right? And so for some of you who don't know what I'm talking about, just go grab any video of this guy on TikTok and you'll quickly find out what I mean. He does reaction videos to what people post, primarily videos that people are posting on real estate. But I've seen videos that had nothing to do with real estate and it just burned his biscuits and he had to say something about it, right? But the beauty of what you do, and we talked about this before the interview, like, I like it just because it's authentically you. Like, I don't think you're lying literally about anything that you stated. Even when you give a harsh cutoff at the end of a video of an opinion, I'm curious about it only because, again, there's so many agreeable, Annies out there in social media land. What made you choose to show up like that on social media? Was it something else that you saw? Was it just you're that like PO'd behind these videos? Like, how did you get there?
It's a few different things. So like, I've been authentic in my marketing, whether it was on Facebook, which was years ago. I hardly market on Facebook anymore, but like very authentic on Facebook. My YouTube page, I'm authentic on. TikTok, I'm way more direct on my approach to certain opinions. But I think authenticity is very important because like it keeps me, I don't want to be a different person at the dinner table than I am online. Like when you meet me, I want to be the same person. It makes my life a whole lot easier for me to be consistent. So like if I'm trying to temper what I say online, but then you meet me and we're having lunch and I have opinions, because here's the thing, if we're just robots, if we're having conversation and not actually sharing, what we think. And I think to have deep, meaningful relationships with anyone, you have to be able to have thoughtful dialogue on a bunch of different things. Like you have to be willing to express your views. And the way I'm going to grow and learn as a human being is somebody's going to offer counterpoints to me. We're going to have a discussion about it. And who knows, I might change my opinion. They may change theirs. But it's never going to happen if we're not having a good, thoughtful discussion on it. So when I look at this stuff online, I think there's a lot of BS on the internet where you have some of these, these gurus that will come in here and share certain thoughts. For example, there's a video of mine. It's one of mine. I think I have it pinned that blew up where Brad Lee said that life begins at $20K a month. And for me, I took exception to that because like the average income in America is around $50,000 a year. So like $20K a month is 240. It's almost 5X, what the median income is. So I took exception to it because I'm like, you're telling the vast majority of people I mean, like 240 grand is essentially the top 1.5% of earners. So you're saying that 98.5% of people don't have a life. Like their life hasn't even started. Like their life is pointless until they get to this $20,000 mark. I took exception to that because some of the best people and greatest people I know, like they exist around or below that 50K a year mark. Your life is not defined by the amount of money that you make. Your happiness is not defined by the amount of money that you make. So there's things like that drive me nuts, and that almost no one offers the counterpoint to it online. So like when I looked at that, I'm like, people that are in the position that I was when I was bartending, like one of the worst things for me is when I looked at stuff and like when you talk about where I was and if it was a positive or a negative place, one of the things that would make it a negative place is when I would constantly hear things that made me feel like a failure. So when I hear something that is 20K a month is where life begins, my thought is like, oh, well, I'm failing. Like my life has not amounted to anything. I'm so far away from that number. And I think the counterpoint to that sort of thing is incredibly important for people to hear. Like they need to hear that dialogue that I have at the kitchen table, that other people have at the kitchen table. That needs to be happening publicly so that they can understand that they're not a failure, that there is, a path for them to maybe, I mean, even if financial success isn't in the future, like a path to happiness and a path to having a fulfilling life, like that's not dependent on 20K a month. So like, I felt like that sort of thing was very important to counterpoint. But I to your point where you say that like a lot of people don't want to have those objections, I think a lot of people are afraid of like being canceled, having an opinion that's going to get them, we live in a cancel culture. So it's like people are afraid that they're going to say something that people are going to shun them and push them aside and never listen to them again. And it's like, listen, it's like if I don't have any voice, there is no difference between me having no voice and me being canceled. It's the same situation.
Wow.
If I am sitting in my house, not saying anything about anything, I might as well have already been canceled.
Wow.
Like, so it's, if I get, somehow something happens and somebody's like, Bob Tompkins is, enemy of the world. And like, I get canceled. It does not change where I would have been had I never said anything.
Interesting. Silence is agreement, as they say, right?
It is.
So, yeah, and I think the thing that I enjoy about seeing when you do these is not the fact. I love your context there. It's about providing a counterpoint so people don't feel alienated or like I can't have a good life unless. I love that. And I think the thing that I like about the reactions that you are giving is because in real time, you are sharing a thought that I would dare say most people would dismiss. Most people would watch the original video and feel terrible. And then go watch another video and feel terrible. And go look at somebody else's and go, crap. And then finally put their phone down an hour later and feel like none of my life is any good, right? And to your point, I do believe that it does contribute to our overall mental health. I think it contributes to our overall current state, right, of where you are like right now, and how we treat people around us, but let me give you a counterpoint to your counterpoint. It's very easy for Brad Lee or Ryan Pineda or, somebody else to say to you, but Bob, I'm trying to wake people up so that they strive for more. That's why I'm putting out this content, Bob. That's why I'm sharing my life. That's why, Bob, I told you about my $20,000 a month eating out, bill. That's why I told you about the house that I bought and the car that I bought. That's why my name is Grant Cardone, Bob, because I came from oodles and noodles and and not having a lot and living in my car. Bob, I'm trying to wake people up that there's a path here. What's wrong with that?
So here's my issue with specifically the big three. I say these are the big three that I have a problem with: Grant Cardone, Bradley, and Ryan Pineda.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to use who I view very much as he's an antithesis to the three of them. And some people may disagree with me on this. Some people may hate him. But Gary Vaynerchuk is very different than those three people.
Okay.
And the reason he's very different is because he doesn't get up and flex. Like, now, he has a little bit when it comes to like NFTs, but like for the most part, he does not get up and flex and say, look at what I've made, or he doesn't put these lofty numbers up or anything like that. He's very much a like, hey, look, here's how you can eat dirt and it will get you to a better place. And he like teaching people how to go, hack garage sales and flip stuff and actually showing him doing it is like, that is a way more, it's part of the reason if you look at my channel, I never have a gripe with Gary. And like, there may be a few things he does or a few things he says that I don't agree with, but like, I'm not going to go in and rip on him because I think his overall message is very much of like, hey, here's how you can better yourself. Here's how you can get to a better place. Where Grant, Brad and Ryan are, for the most part, they're kicking back and saying, hey, look at this great place that I'm in and it's possible. It's like, yeah, but like how do I need to do it? And all of them, and this is my irritation with all three of them, is they're like, oh, if you want to know how to do it, go buy my course. Come to my seminars. Come do my... Gary is like, here's how you do it. Like he's just telling you as much as he can. And some of it may be right and some of it may be wrong. But like he is not gatekeeping those things that he says have got him to success. Where the other three are all gatekeeping it. And you can even argue if you go through the gate that it's not really even that valuable of information. So it's like, I think that you've got some guys that have gotten themselves in a great position, however they got there. I mean, like Grant legitimately worked his way there. Bradley was handed a bunch of money by his family. Ryan Pineda, I don't really understand his backstory. So like, I'm not going to, but like those guys, they've gotten to a great position and they're not really showing me how to get there. They're just showing me that they made it. So I have a problem with that. If you've made it and then you turn around and you try and make some statement like Grant Cardone saying, oh, I didn't know how to be happy with myself making less than $400,000 a year. It's like, shut up, bro. Like, what do you like? Because the message there is that you shouldn't be happy with yourself.
Yeah, the indirect message is a lot louder than what he's saying. I understand.
Exactly. Yeah, like the message is, I couldn't find a way to be happy making less than $4 million. And if you can, good for you. Like it's this dismissive attitude that if you can't make $400,000, there's no reason you should be happy. Like essentially casting failure onto people to get them to go to his seminars, buy his course, do whatever. It's like, for me, that is the problem. Because you can live a very fulfilled, happy life on way less money. It's all about what you put it's what you put your stake in. Like, what do you really care about? I mean, if what you care about is money, sure, like you're going to want as much of it as possible. But like that's the crux of my issue with them. That's where it lies. And if they were very upfront on like, hey, this is how you can do these things. Here's step 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Like what you do for people, setting them up and putting them in a position to learn how to build small business and build side hustles and like grow. There is a lot of honor in the way you help people. I don't think there's a lot of honor in the way those three people help people.
Man, this is so good. This is so interesting. So, when you've looked at, your business and what you do in real estate, you mentioned at the very beginning, hey, we've got now like 400 agents that we've helped and built this organization with. What has it taught you about people? because it's I don't 400 is a small church and a good one, by the way, in America. So what has have you learned about people as you've talked to one and helped another person, and maybe another person didn't see it and couldn't, but what have you started to really learn about people, because you're in a people business? You don't do real estate if you can't talk to people. I don't care who you are. This is not a automation game. You have got to talk to people, and for you to literally have 400 plus people, all that you can say, I have impacted their lives enough that, number one, they wanted to come work with me and collaborate in this world of real estate, and two, we've been able to build. What are you learning about humans? Like, that's a lot of people.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, and I'll keep this kind of concise. The biggest thing that I've learned about people is how important community is to them. When we try and do this stuff, whether it's business, life, whatever, if we try and do it alone, it is a very, very hard road to travel. Like, and being able to just like, because one of the biggest things when you bring on 400 plus people, like to a company, you can't give them all one-to-one. Like, it's not possible. So like they may want, to pick my brain, or they may want to pick somebody, that's in their upline or whatever. They may want to pick the brain, but it's very hard to do one-to-one. So the best way to impact people is to foster community that they can plug into and learn from one another. So it has taught me how to build community and the importance of that community to where people feel like they're a part of a family. And for a lot of agents, it's not something that they've ever had before, because like we live in a cutthroat, but I mean, it's a very cutthroat business. It's I'm going to get mine. I'm going to fight for my clients. Like, it's very much like I have to do these things, and it's hard to find that good, solid community of people that you can plug into and encourage. And I think that is one of the biggest things I've learned about people, is how important that is. And when it exists, how much it impacts their lives.
Yeah. As we wrap up here, I've got a couple more questions. Obviously in our world, aside business builders, real estate is an option. But time and time again, there are more obviously failures than there are wins, right? Today's world is, to your point earlier, full of controversy, a lot of fear-based, a lot of trying to predict the future. When you look at real estate, and obviously you did it as a side business as well, because you were also bartending. What do you think talk to the person who will hear this episode on a podcast and hear you sharing, your thoughts, to the corporate person who's, looking at potentially starting a side business, and they've heard about real estate and maybe they're a little afraid. Why should someone literally give themselves permission to start a side business, especially if I've never done that before, or I failed and I didn't like that little ugly feeling of failing? Why is a side business a good idea?
So speaking from personal experience, a side business can turn into a full career. Like, so if you apply yourself, if you do the right things, it can allow you to exit a situation where you are subject to what someone else wants you to do. Like, so for me, like, granted, I still have a duty to my clients and what they want me to do, but like, I can turn down clients. I can work when I want to work. Like, I have the freedom because I don't have someone over my head telling me what I have to do, when I have to do it. So like that is, where it can lead is a huge reason to do it. It's tough it's tough to get yourself to the place where you have to be okay with failure. You talk about how a ton of more people fail than they succeed in real estate and business in general. I think if you look at the metrics of basically any sort of startup, it is the overwhelming majority fail. It's somewhere around 80% of any new business fails. It never gets off the ground. But if you want to be able to live a life that gives you the freedom, and not only that, the pride that you've built it. If you want to be able to have those things, you have to have the courage to go and do it. But it also your success, I think, greatly depends on who you want to do it for. Because if you try and go and do the stuff for yourself, like we talk about it a lot, like in the real estate side of things, we talk about or within our community, we talk about what's your why? Like, why are you doing it? Why do you get up? We even talk about this at the gym I'm a part of. It's like, what is your why for getting up and going to the gym every single day? And if your why is something vain, like if it is something like, oh, I want to make money, or I want people to view me a certain way, or I want to be able to flex, like that stuff gets very old, very, very, very fast. Like it loses its luster, and then there's this next vain thing that you have to seek after. If your why is built on providing for your family, if it is built on helping people, if it is built on impacting your community, if those are the sort of things that you are built on, those things don't go away. Like providing for my family is a stable why, because I have my wife and I have my kids, as long as I continue to treat them the way I do and I don't run them off. Like I have that thing as a stable why. It does not go away. If I want to impact my community is a stable why. There are things like that you have to have that are constant, that you are working for, and that is going to fuel the desire to build the side hustle. The other thing is, I'll make this point, with side hustles, there's no real failure. Like, because the failure of the side hustle just keeps you in the same place, which is likely your corporate job or the thing that you're doing. You can continue to recycle and repeat side hustles until you find one that works for you and sticks. Now, it is a little bit different if you're going in and it's the only thing you're doing. Like if it's not a side hustle, if it's straight up a business startup and it's the only thing you're doing, failure is incredibly scary, but it does depend on kind of what situation you're in. If you're looking at doing it as a side business, like whatever that is, that I would say there needs to be no fear in it, because you have stability already. It's all upside on a side business or a startup like that. So, I would say press into it, because you're not sacrificing where you're at to try and get somewhere.
Yeah.
Even though you made the comment earlier, when my back's against the wall, don't bet on the wall. I do think there is power in removing safety nets.
Yeah,
like
100%.
When you remove safety nets, it's like, man, you can't let go. Like you're climbing that rock wall, you can't let go, because nothing's gonna catch you.
Mm-mm.
Like you gotta hold on. So it is. I think there's power in it. In fact, one of my agents that's on my team. So, I mean, she's one of the 400, but our team's a lot smaller. So it's like, her name's Kinsley. She had a waiting job, and we had this constant battle for like 7-8 months, where it's like, you got to get out of waiting the tables. And I was like, as long as you have that, it's like, yeah, she's only doing it a couple days a week, but there was always the opportunity to pick up shifts. There was always a couple $100 that was sitting out there that she could just go and get if she needed it.
Yeah.
And I was like, that is keeping you from really following up with the clients and pressing into your business, because you feel like, oh, well, I can always just go get a couple hundred if I need a couple hundred, And those safety nets, they're good to have, especially if you need them for stability. But at the same time, I think that they greatly reduce your ceiling as long as they exist.
Man, wow. Man, this has been, first of all, let me say this. thank you for your contribution to the marketplace. I don't think we say that enough when we meet people. You know, you got a favorite restaurant in your neighborhood that's a local restaurant, and they probably don't hear thank you enough, right? All the families that get fed, even though people that didn't like their food, that there was still an option, right? And what I love about the way you show up authentically and what you do, it's a I think it's needed in the marketplace, and I think there will always be a space because you're choosing to be authentic. My last question for you is this: you mentioned you got a 12-week-old and 2 years old, right?
Yep.
So let's go 10 years into the future. Talk to them and let them know, why is Dad building this business? What is it that you are after? While they're small now, don't get it yet. And I know there's been some things that we've talked about outside of this interview that is kind of you got a goal. But 10 years from now, if they come and watch this interview, what do you want them to know? Hey, I know you're enjoying this episode, but what would be helpful for you right now? Not only continuing to listen to these episodes and these interviews that we conduct, or being able to build you a high value side business. That's right. Well, I have something for you. We've created the most active community, the top of the line masterclass that you need to be a part of. It is called the Side Business Masterclass. That's right. I need you to go right now to sidebusinessmasterclass.com. Join us. Every single week, I am giving you an opportunity to learn and hear what we are actually covering. And more importantly, you can be a part of our program. That's right. Inside of our program, you're going to get masterclasses. You're going to get exclusive access to experts. You're going to learn and be able to leverage our focus framework. More importantly, how you can use it using the current skill sets that you're already using on your day job. And how do you turn that into something that can be a high value side business that can start to make you your own revenue that you pull the lever on? Because I'm telling you right now, if you don't create your own leverage, you're somebody else's. So go to sidebusinessmasterclass.com right now and let's get started building you a high value side business. And let's get back to the episode.
Yeah. So, my kids, they're Waveland and Sheffield are their names. Waveland, Sheffield, if you end up watching this, like the biggest thing that I want you guys to understand is that you can do anything that you set your mind to. You can do it by being the person that you are. There is a huge there's a huge influence from the world on you to try and conform to it or try and be what the world wants you to be, this ideal image of success. And that is what the world wants you to think, but it's not what's required to be successful. And I think personally that the greatest level of success that you can have is by going at business and going at life in a way that is true to yourself. So when you approach things, when you do things, don't hold back on who you are. In fact, the way you will grow into the person that you will be and the person that you are is by having authenticity and having open conversations to allow people to, offer rebuttals and to offer conversation that allow you to grow. Otherwise, you're going to fall into, this very narrow way of thinking, this very narrow way of living life that just conforms to everything around you. And there are times that conforming is fine, that conforming is the right thing. But largely, I think being authentic to yourself is going to allow you to live a much fuller life and a life that you can find a lot more satisfaction in. So if there's one thing I would want my kids to hear, it's that. And also, if there's one thing that I'd want the audience to hear, it's that.
Man, this has been incredible. There's so many nuggets, and I appreciate you being willing just to give up your time, man. Because it's not something you can get back. We can't go back and rewind and be like, all right, let me go do something with the time that I gave on this show. So thank you, Bob. Bob, tell everybody where they can find you. and you know how they can get in touch with you.
Yep. So TikTok is going to be the best place to find my content and be able to follow me. So that is at Bob Tompkins. But if you want to connect with me, Instagram is far better because DMs on TikTok suck. So DMs on Instagram are far better. So it's at Bob Tompkins Realtor on Instagram. So if you go there, if you jump in my DMs, I try to do my very best to respond to anybody that jumps in. Sometimes people get buried in the request. But you know, I do my very best there, and would love to connect with anybody that you know needs advice, wants to chat out some stuff. You know, I my wife hates it, but I lay in the bed and I respond to DMs for normally about an hour every single night. So like if there's anything you need, like I'd love to be a resource to people.
Well, man, listen, I'm definitely appreciative of the way you serve and have served, and man, shout out to your mom for getting you on this path, because otherwise we'd never have your reaction videos if you didn't. So we definitely appreciate that. So let me say this. Hey team, listen, for those of you in the Side Business Builders group, you've heard an incredible conversation. You just met by far one of the most authentic people that I see show up online. What did you learn? Y'all know yesterday we did Massive Action Monday, and I was talking to you about storytelling, and I told you some things that I wanted you to go do. Don't just sit here and listen to this interview. Go do something with the information of what you just heard. Go take some serious massive action and say, all right, this is what I took from his interview, and I am going to go do X. Go do it. Go talk to us about it. Let us know down in the comments below. For those of you watching on YouTube, thank you for watching. Make sure you share this episode. Let someone else know, hey, this is what I saw. I think it's of value to you. You need to go watch this one, all right? So listen, man, thank y'all so much for being here. Thank you for showing up, not for me, not for Bob, but for yourself, right? Hopefully you found value in this. Thank you. Have a great, incredible day. And guess what? We'll catch you guys in the next episode.